Welcome to the David Elstein Podcast. I'm excited. It's my first episode, and what better guest to have on than my friend Dan Dunlop. Welcome, Dan. You're the guinea pig, but seriously, when I was going through who should I invite, you came up as number one. I mean, we've known each other for about 10 years,
Oh my
both
God.
professionally, friends, and it's been great. So I thought of you first. So, and Happy New Year.
Yes, Happy New Year to you. I hope you had a good New Year's Eve last night.
New Year's Eve for me these days is going to bed by about 10, 11 at most. I don't know about you.
My wife is she loves staying up late. So we were up till about 3 last night.
Oh my God. Well,
Yeah.
no.
But it's fine.
No, it's all good. So it's funny. So, like any good podcast hosts, I looked at your LinkedIn profile about 10 minutes before we started talking.
Cool.
And it's funny, we're joking, as much as I know you, also, I don't know you. So it seems like you were interested in political science growing up. Do you want to be a politician, or what was your, I guess, background interest?
Yeah, I was interested in American government and politics. I honestly thought I might go, that path. And in college, I did kind of a dual major of communications and political science. And, then I finished school and I was like, what am I doing with this degree? Like most college graduates, I think.
Right.
And so then I said, well, go to graduate school. So I went to graduate school and studied more about communications and politics. And my specialty was marketing political candidates. And I worked on a couple high profile political campaigns. And I have the distinction of never working on a winning campaign. So
Consistent. So
yeah, yeah, but it was interesting working on these campaigns. Especially I worked on one presidential campaign in New Hampshire and Massachusetts and the area of New England, and it was fascinating to see the work that the candidates had to do, the stamina it required. Not just the stamina of the staff, but the stamina of the candidate, doing event after event after event all night. I mean, every evening, and it was really a wild experience. But I quickly realized going through that wasn't the life for me. It was very
yeah.
frenetic, and frankly, you got paid when the candidates got their funds released from the Federal Elections Commission, and so it was very iffy on the money. So, but I had that marketing background, and so I had to decide, where am I going to go with that from there? And I went to work in radio for a few years, and I managed radio stations in North Carolina, in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I worked for this like holding company that had several radio stations, publishing companies, and one ad agency. And at some point, I got hired away from the radio station I was working in to go to work for the ad agency, which was growing really fast, but within the same company. And that was really my introduction to marketing. Even though in radio, we tried to do good advertising and
Yeah.
marketing
Yeah.
for our clients, this was different. And we did marketing for major retailers and shopping mall developers across the country. So someone like Simon or DeBartolo, these big companies that own, hundreds of shopping malls around the country, would hire us to create campaigns for back to school and Christmas and, all these holidays. And it was exclusively marketing to women. And I became an expert in that, and particularly in working with shopping malls around the country that were starting to diminish. They were starting to lose their retailers. It was harder and harder to get tenants, and there was a lot of competition. There were a lot of big box centers competing with shopping malls. So I did that for a while, became an expert in marketing to women, and then moved to this Jennings where I work now. I've been there 30 years, and
Jeez.
they were doing a lot of healthcare work. And interestingly, in healthcare, you also market to women. I mean, they are the primary consumer. They're the caretaker of the whole family. So whether it's a husband's health or a parent's health or whatever, child's health, it flows through the mother typically. So I brought my expertise on marketing to women and primarily listening to women. because one of the things I did when I worked in the mall industry was tons of shop-alongs, secret shopping, focus groups with shoppers to learn what their preferences were and understand their perceptions of the different brands, and then use that in the marketing. And to me, that's what good marketing is all about. It's about listening to the consumer, learning from them, and then putting that into action. Because I never think, David, that you or I have all the wisdom coming in the door. I think we if we're smart, we listen to the audiences we're trying to communicate with, the stakeholder groups, learn from them, and then put that into action.
One thing I neglected, which shame on me as the host, I forgot to mention that you are the principal co-owner of Jennings. So you mentioned passes, but I guess explain, what Jennings is. You explained a little bit, but it's a marketing firm for healthcare clients.
Yeah, there was a time when we did primarily just marketing for hospitals and health systems around the country. And it's been exciting and fascinating to watch our development and evolution over the years, where now that's really a small part of our business. Everything we do is healthcare, but it's not all about hospitals and health systems. It can be physician practices, clinics. We work for a really prestigious group of fertility clinics. But we also work with boards like the American Board of Orthopedic Surgery, the American Board of Surgery, a number, probably 4 or 5 boards. Most of our clients are nonprofits, so they're nonprofit healthcare organizations. Right now, we've been really active in doing marketing for hospice organizations, which to me, who would have imagined? But they need marketing like everybody else, and people have choice, especially in states. Some states have a certificate of need, where, like North Carolina, in order to build a healthcare facility or start a new healthcare business, you have to apply with the state, and they have to, make a judgment about, is there a need for this additional service in the market. And so you don't get flooded, hopefully, with too many providers in a certain area. Whereas a state like Georgia, for example, does not have certificate of need. So in Georgia, you might have an area like Savannah, for example, where you could have 20 or 25 hospice providers, different organizations, and a lot of them are private equity groups, who are coming in. They're well funded. They're all about, I hate to be cliche about this, but they are about the money, because they are beholding to investors, and they're competing against traditional nonprofit hospice organizations. And we tend to enjoy being the champion of the nonprofit.
Right. No. So I guess, that's a good point about, now it's competition with hospice, and and I was thinking of questions for you. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when you could not market prescription drugs to consumers. I mean, or that I said I grew up loving commercials. I mean, you had your political science background. I thought this is what I was going to do growing up. I mean, I did think I was going to be a TV reporter, then a print reporter from the youngest age, majored in journalism. So I still remember local TV commercials from 35, not 40 years ago. And yeah, I don't remember hospital commercials. There were not the drug commercials. And it's, so I guess what changed with all, I mean, some of those regulations, or just it turned the need, for lack of a better term?
There were a number of factors, David, I think, that came into play. And I'm not a healthcare marketing historian, but I do know, you're right. There was a time where there were not advertisements for hospitals and health systems or medical practices. But I think when you got into the 80s in particular, consumer society started to change, and consumers were being more empowered. Consumer choice was a really big thing, and in the medical world, consumers were starting to feel like they could make their own decisions. Like, it wasn't just, back in the day, the doctor says, "Oh, you got to cut off your leg. It's got to go." The patient's like, "Okay, doc, you're God. I'll do it." But that started to change, and by the time we got into the 80s, consumers were really feeling empowered and like they wanted choice, and that included in healthcare. And so at the same time, on the healthcare side, you had this movement where healthcare was starting to become more of a business. It wasn't just about caring for people. It was about, wow, this is a place where we can grow, we can make money, we can do mergers and acquisitions.
HMOs happened. That's it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, so much was going on with insurance, with health systems. Health systems started acquiring other hospitals, and mergers and acquisitions became a big thing. So you had these, at least as far as I see it, you have this consumers wanting choice and wanting to be empowered, and then health systems seeing this as a business. So all of a sudden, advertising started to make sense, and marketing started to make sense because prior to that, I mean, in a health system, you had kind of a PR office and corporate communications,
Right, right.
and they did health fairs maybe, but there were no ad campaigns or anything. So I think it was those factors that really led to it. And by the time I started doing healthcare marketing, gosh, when was it? In the early 90s. It was going strong in the early 90s, and we were doing big brand campaigns. Brand became a really big thing, and brand was important because these health systems were going through mergers and acquisitions, and people needed to know what differentiated a UNC Healthcare from a Duke Medical Center or Duke Medicine, whoever they happen to be. So suddenly, and to get market share and keep market share, that became important. And it became important for smaller hospitals who now had to suddenly compete with these growing health systems. So they had to then start marketing to defend their market share and keep patients at home. And every little community hospital in America started running campaigns saying "Great care close to home." That was kind of the theme.
No, it's like, yeah, you've got a lot of interesting things. And I guess the thing about healthcare marketing is you and I, as well as everyone, we are the consumers in this case. Yes, we're both men, but yes, but for better for worse, we've both been consumers over the last few years of the healthcare system. So
Yeah.
so we both of us do see what's right and what's wrong. Like I'll sometimes go to one of the facilities. Like, how come your TV is not working? That you could be showing advertising things that no one else cares about because everyone else has better things to do. So what, just in general terms, what are healthcare organizations not doing right? What are they missing when they try to market to consumers?
Wow, that's a huge question, David. Um, yeah, I wish healthcare systems were asking themselves that same question. I think it's easy to be simplistic in this, and I'm going to be simplistic. But I think we're all caught up. I go to all these healthcare conferences. I know you go to a lot of conferences. Everything is about AI right now, and there's always whatever the thing of the moment is. And AI is for real. I'm not dismissing AI. I use AI every day in my job, but I think health systems and healthcare providers in general um, don't spend enough time and attention on the fundamentals, we're implementing all this technology. Like, everybody has my chart or some version of a um, digital health record or medical your personal health record. um, and rather than focus on all this technology, I think which we need, and I love it. I love being able to go into my chart and access all my information
Yes.
and shoot a message to a doctor. What I don't like is I don't get a message back most of the time. What I don't like is when I go to make an appointment with a doctor using my chart, and that specific doctor, you can't book an appointment using my chart. You have to contact them and call the office, and then you call the office, and what happens? You get a voicemail, and you're leaving a voicemail message. So I think the lack of humanity in healthcare is my biggest challenge with the organization, and I think that applies to both the consumer and other stakeholder groups, in particular employees of healthcare organizations. Because if employees aren't feeling cared for and nurtured and loved, then how good are they going to be at caring for your patients? So I think what healthcare organizations don't understand for the most part, and there are some who are brilliant at this, but most do not understand that corporate culture, the culture you bring to your organization is going to impact your brand and how it's perceived by your internal stakeholders and external stakeholders. And it's going to impact how people feel about your organization. And how people feel about your organization is going to impact how they use your organization and interact with your organization. So if anything, yes, we're slow to adopt technology in healthcare. We're always behind, other industries, but really that doesn't bother me. What bothers me, we should be slow because this is healthcare. We want to be careful. But what bothers me is we should be nurturing. This is healthcare. We should be nurturing organizations. We should be caring. This is not typical business. And I think that's part of the problem. When we went through that evolution, healthcare tried to become like every other industry in America. And we're not like every other industry in America. We're different. And we've got to be loving and caring and nurturing, not just of our patients, but of our employees. Because the biggest issue right now with the majority of my clients, David, is recruitment and retention. Whether it's a hospice organization, a clinic, whether a health system, whatever it might be, recruitment and retention is vital. And the way people are addressing it in the healthcare industry is they're throwing money at that problem. They're offering nurses a $25,000 signing bonus. Nurses are great. We need nurses, but throwing money at them is not going to keep them as employees. Nurses are leaving the profession in record numbers right now, not because they don't make enough money, but because they are not treated well, and they don't feel like they're valued. So I think a big thing is helping CEOs and the C-suite folks in healthcare organizations understand that culture is number one. You've got to work on your internal branding, on your culture. Your people have to feel respected and appreciated. And then if you do that, that's going to help you attract new employees, because if somebody goes to your website and it's obvious looking at your website or looking at your social media that here's an organization that really showcases their employees, that really cares about their employees, that's a place I want to work, because life is short and I don't want to work for some machine. I want to work for a caring organization. So there's my rant, David.
Yeah, no, it's a good rant. And I think you and I've had conversations in the past. I mean, the employees, they're your first line communicators. They're the ones that they run into their friend at the grocery store and either say great things about and it's not just healthcare, their company, or bad things. And, then wait, I trust Mary. If she says this organization treats employees horribly, even if I don't want to work there, hey, do I want to go, whatever they serve, do I want to go there? So yes, it's not just treating, employees well, the communication, but this goes back for years. I think employees are often not thought of as communicators. Yes, let's treat our employees well. It's the right thing to do. It's good for the business. But that other part with, that they are the marketing people. They are the face of the organization. When you have a hospital that has thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of faces, it's important.
They should be your number one communicators. It's fascinating. I always use the example when I'm teaching. We do brand ambassador training where we'll go into an organization and train key personnel on how to be ambassadors of the brand. And the main thing is to have that consciousness that when you're in the grocery store, David, as you mentioned, you run into someone and they see you're wearing a badge from a given hospital or medical practice, and they say, "Oh, you work at so and so." What story do you tell at that time? What face do you put forward? I just always tell the story about my firm was doing work for an organization, a higher education client that was building a big new nursing school. And it was like a $50 million facility they were building, but they were having real issues with negative vibes in the community and negative PR. And I was like, what's behind this? So I did all these interviews with staff and employees to find out, what was going on. And I talked to them about this incredible $50 million project that was happening on, this construction, and it was going to be done in another year, and it was going to bring in all these new students. And the story employees would tell me was, you know what? I can't get a parking place when I come to work. And it's dusty and it's dirty and my car's covered with, dirt from the construction. And so when they're going out into the community, they were telling this story. People were saying, how are things going at your institution? They're like, oh, let me tell you, it's a nightmare right now. Instead of saying, oh my gosh, we're building this new $50 million School of Nursing building on our campus. And that's a great example of brand storytelling and the importance of being a brand ambassador and being very intentional in the kind of stories you tell. But employees don't think of themselves that way. They don't naturally walk around going, I'm a brand ambassador. We have to elevate their consciousness and make them aware of the fact that, yes, you are a really important part of our brand. And every day when you're out there in the community, whether you're coming from church or synagogue or whatever, you're telling brand stories that impact the way people feel about us. I know, during the pandemic, people would go home, and they do this even when there's not a pandemic, but they would go home to their spouse and tell them how horrible things were at work. We don't have enough PPE. We've got all these issues. It's like they're working incredibly long hours. And when you go home and complain to your spouse or your partner or whatever, that sticks with them. And you go back the next day and have a good day and you're fine. But the spouse remembers the horrible days that you talked about.
And you don't talk about the good days, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Which are probably most of the days.
And then your spouse talks to friends. And that becomes the buzz about your brand. So it's a powerful topic. And I love doing brand work and brand ambassador work because employees, if properly empowered and given the tools, they can become, absolutely to your point, your best marketing resource.
Yeah, and you don't have to be fake about it.
No,
as employees, it's you're not giving them a script and they're reading like a robot. It's just some of these little things. If you have a ratty shirt with your hospital on, don't wear that in public. I think some of these simple things. I guess one of the things you and I have had discussions over the years about this is measuring success. Marketing is a little bit easier. We can debate all day what marketing versus communication is, but here's another one. I'm old enough. I'm old enough. When I was an intern in the late 90s, we would cut out clips from newspapers and we would measure, okay, this is 8 inches. And for people out there that are young, so there's a thing called newspapers. And you cut out, and you would know that per inch, the average rate was X amount of dollars. So you marked in, 8 inches by whatever is $100 an ad inch. Oh, we got $800 in free advertising. And it didn't matter if it was good or bad. It didn't matter if, the hospital killed a patient or they're having a health fair or something good. So that was ridiculous. Places have gotten better. And some marketing could do ROI. But a lot of times, and personally, it's hard to say, that was a great video we did, but did it move the needle? And sometimes I don't even know if the needle is. So, I guess in general, Dan, this is almost like as marketers can, listening, how do they, show their boss, their CEO that in essence, they're worthwhile? Because there's not always a case you could say, look, I made the company $500,000. I saved the company $500,000. I did a good job. I made a nice video. How do you prove your worth, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, that's the eternal challenge of marketers. And we are not good at that, typically within our industry, telling those stories about what we do and why it's important and how it's effective. I think there are a couple of different paths you can go down, and certainly it's important to still, using your example of measuring the column inches on
right.
stories that would come out in the newspaper. I do think it's still important that you maintain metrics, that you track key metrics, you define key metrics. What are we trying to do? But you get into a lot of vanity metrics, how many impressions are we trying to gain through our digital campaign? And digital advertising is great for metrics because, man, you can just overload your C-suite team with with all kinds of data that looks impressive, but what does it really mean? Um, but I also think so. You got to do that. That's just important. You've got to say, okay, these are our goals for the year. This is what we're trying to accomplish. This is what we did accomplish. Like today, I'm going to work on a summary of what did we accomplish this year as a company, because I think it's important to take stock of that and to share that with the people you work with. But I also think it's important, going back to my comments about culture and being nurturing and kind and caring, I think it's important that as the marketer at the table and the communicator at the table, it's important to educate your C-suite folks and your board members, in your case, David, that marketing is more than metrics. This really is about brand and how people perceive your organization. And then that opens the door to you sharing information that's more sharing anecdotes, sharing verbatim responses. Like one of the things when I do my brand assessments and I go through and do all these interviews with brand constituents, I'm big on sharing the verbatim responses because those hold weight with your leadership. When they hear the words from their stakeholders, they read them on the page. This is what they're saying about us. That's important. So doing those kind of listening assignments or projects where you can report back to your leadership and say, this is what we're hearing. This is what people are saying about us on LinkedIn. This is what they're saying about us on Facebook and Twitter. This is what they're saying about us on these forums, that they belong to. I think that's valuable as well. But making leadership aware that it's not just about numbers in marketing. Yes, we can contribute to the bottom line, but it's more about brand and how people perceive us and managing the way people perceive us.
No, and actually, when you say that, I was thinking of an interesting story from a healthcare company I work with. Jeez, so the timing is actually sort of important. So it's probably about 15 years ago, and we had this great video, and they said make the video go viral. Yes, exactly, and that was now we'd sort of laugh more, but yes, that was the time. Yes, yes, sir. I mean, so we had those unrealistic expectations. Then I've worked for places where the CEO gets it because luckily communications is in the right case often part of the CEO, the president, whoever's office. So I get to work with them. So I've worked with people that value market communications, and others where make this viral. I guess what misconceptions, sort of on the same thing, do you see from because you talk to definitely the C-suites. Do they have things when you meet with them, they say we want Jennings to do this, and you're thinking we're not magic. I mean, it's a simple example that we can't promise you we'll make it viral. We'll do a darn good job of making a video and doing what we know. But I mean, are there other misconceptions or other interesting, whether anecdotes or things that you hear that's like we're not magic?
Yeah, it's funny. I was working with a health system on the West Coast a few years ago, and they brought us in to help with to elevate their brand nationally and regionally. And one of their goals on the list of goals that they had for the campaign that we were going to help them with, and we ended up doing a thought leadership campaign nationally and regionally. But one of their goals was to have their CEO listed on the top 50 list, Modern Healthcare's top 50 list of the 50 most influential physician leaders in the country. Their CEO was also a physician. And I told them point blank, I mean, I think you have to be candid and you have to be straightforward. And I told them, I said, this will not happen. This, I know this sounds great as a goal, but this will not happen. And you could leave it on your sheet if you want, but I will tell you, we are not becoming one of the 50 best known physician leaders in the country because, there are probably 12 congressmen and senators who are physicians. They're going to be on the list automatically. Then they're going to take the CEOs of Dartmouth and Johns Hopkins and the
Right.
Cleveland Clinic. And I could assemble that list myself, each year. And it's not going to be this little hospital on the West Coast that no one's ever heard of. They were having awareness problems in their own state, not to mention nationally. So I think part of it is being honest and being willing to take that risk of saying, that's just not a realistic goal, and why, and then challenge maybe why is that important? Why do you want it to happen? But the odd thing was the next year that CEO was like number 37 on Modern Healthcare's list.
Congratulations.
So I had to eat my words. They were like, Dan, we told you we could do this.
Well, that's funny. Well, the other one, I guess, it's back. It used to be, I want to be on New York Times above the fold. I guess Wall Street Journal is a good second place, but it's unrealistic. You have, there has to be a story to tell. It's just not, I've done it before with public relations for, like, how come you're not getting any stories? Because it's not an interesting client. You have no stories to tell, and there's a new ones, nothing even to make up. So, they sort of, wind down. So this is, beginning of 2026. You talked a little bit about AI. So, how does AI fit into all this as us marketers, communicators? And then, it all comes back to me. This is the name of, it's the David Elstein Podcast. How worried should I, David Elstein, be about AI? Either me as a 47-year-old communications person, or, if I go back to, a 27-year-old, like as a junior level, would that be something I would have needed to be worried about if I was, a young person?
Well, David, I'll tell you the great thing about being old, and I'm not saying you're old, but you might be getting older. No, the great thing about being old, though, and having lived a lot of years and having been a professional for a lot of years, is you see a lot of change. And obviously, one of the things I've known in my career is that change is a constant. And it's cliche to say it, but it is absolutely the truth. And you have to get comfortable with change. And I can remember sitting at my desk in 2009 in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and having my creative director and the head of account services come into my office and complain about social media and how there's all this buzz about social media and it's all just going to blow over and go away. And I was like, no, it is not going to go away. It is not. We need to embrace it. We need to figure it out. So I started my own blog. I started it on 3 different platforms because different healthcare hospitals are really bad about blocking different, access to different platforms. So I started on 3 different platforms so healthcare marketers could get to it. And I built this online community for healthcare marketers. And I started, tweeting on Twitter. I started posting on Facebook. I already belonged to LinkedIn, so I started using LinkedIn more. But accept it and learn. I dove in. I said, I don't know anything about Pinterest, but people are talking about Pinterest, and a lot of women use Pinterest, and I'm marketing to women. So I said, I still have a Pinterest account to this day. But start using these things. So I would say the same applies to AI. AI is not going away, and AI is nothing new. People are making AI into something it's not. It is not this thing that's fallen from a tree, 6 months ago.
Right.
AI has been there. It's just more pronounced now, and I use AI every day and I love it. I love having, especially I'm like so many other people out there. I work remotely. My whole staff works remotely. And when I'm working on a document and I need somebody to review it, it's a whole lot quicker for me to upload it and have an AI tool evaluate it and give me feedback. David, I was mentioned earlier, I like verbatim responses and I like sharing them with leadership because they're meaningful. I did a brand assessment for an organization in Georgia, and I had about 100 pages of verbatim responses, and I already had them sorted by stakeholder group, but that was it. And I was like, what am I going to do with all these? And I just uploaded them into the AI tool we use, and I said, hey, please take these verbatim responses by stakeholder group, define, so employees, board members, blah, blah. And I said, and sort them by theme. And 60 seconds later, this would have taken me days to do.
Yeah.
And I'm not exaggerating. 60
Yeah.
seconds later, I have this sort of my thing. And there's some things I need to go through and fix. And I can then start cutting and deleting and changing or combining themes that are very similar. But man, to have that really smart business partner right there for me to engage with, it's fascinating. And I think for you, my advice to you and everybody else is just embrace it. Get involved, use an AI tool, and see what you're able to accomplish. See what you like about it, what you don't like about it. I love it as an editor. I write blog posts for clients, and these are healthcare clients, and they're topics I'm not super familiar with, and I can't ask a physician to write them because it'll take too much time, and they'll complain. And so I'll go into our AI tool and say, hey, I need to write a blog post about PCOS. What are 5 good topics around PCOS that would be relevant today? And it'll give me 5 topics. And then, or it'll give me 10, and then I can pick from those and write a blog post based on that. Because I'm not an expert on that, but it can help me find the sources, and it will identify sources for me. So I think it's overblown. I'm so tired of AI topics. You're like me, David.
Every conference has it.
Every conference, man, it's just AI this, AI that. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And the thing I would advise people to do, it's just like social media, in that when social media first came on the scene in a big way, there was lots of talk about social media and lots of hemming and hawing, but there wasn't a lot of practical information about how do I use this in my job. So I would encourage the people who are giving these presentations at conferences to make it more nuts and bolts. How can David Elstein use AI to help him do his job and to help his organization further its goals from a communication standpoint? Be practical. I spent probably 3 years from like 2010 to 2013 doing these webinars, just social media 101, and teaching people the practical side of social media. Like, here's how to use it, because people thought it was enough just to get on it and start spewing crap, and that's not good, but how to use it strategically and how to sell it to your organization, to your CEO, to say, hey, this is why social media is important. So being more strategic in how you use it, and I think the same applies to AI.
Yeah, it was interesting because you joined us. You might have been the first speaker with that, a group I started of communicators and marketing orthopedic surgery societies. And we actually, last month or so, we talked about AI, and one of the groups was saying, maybe 2 of them, our leadership require AI. I'm like, what do you mean require AI? In essence, you better not go to your boss and say, I need, more, I need another employee because I don't have enough time for so-and-so. Because the first thing I was going to say, wait, did you have AI help you cut down on these tasks? I'm like, I was just blown away. But the other thing,
wow,
it's interesting because talking to this group, I love writing. And, a lot of the things we do is, no, I don't want AI to write it. And it's, I'll have to get used to it. I think some of it for me, I'm so quick to typing. I had shoulder surgery a couple months ago, and for the beginning, I was using the speech to text, not AI, but it couldn't keep up with my thoughts, which I know it's hard even for you, Dan, to keep up with it. I was like, I just want to type. And the same thing where I could probably, because by the time I type out my prompt and edit all the things, it wouldn't be. So no, I'm definitely interested in that. It's gonna be that. Well, it's not gonna be. It is. So. One final thing, what one hope do you have for our industry, healthcare, marketing, communications, however you want to define it?
Yeah, to me, it's exciting, David. I'm at the point in my career where I'm in the last third of my career. And to me, it's really exciting when I see kind of the next generation of marketing leadership and thought leadership rise up, and I see, and I'm not blowing smoke, but I see you evolve in your career, and many of my friends in the industry who are younger than I am, they're maybe the next generation. They're 20 years, 15 years behind me. I love seeing them evolve. And the cool thing for me is there is this nice balance in people like you and your contemporaries of humanity and an appreciation for data. Um, and I love that you like to write, and there will never be. I sure hope there'll never come a day when we don't need people to write and do, and people who can write well. Um, so understanding how you balance that, and I think like you know about the pink socks movement,
Yes, yes,
clearly,
yes.
and the pink socks movement is about to me it's about kindness and bringing kindness and compassion and caring to the profession of healthcare, to healthcare communicators and marketers and healthcare IT folks, not letting us get obsessed with just the technology side of things, but always bringing in that humanity and that connection. So to me, that's what's optimistic. That I see this next level of leadership coming up, um, and they're taking on the challenge, and I think they're not going to let AI and all the technology diminish the humanity in our business. And whether you deal with patients or whether, like you, David, deal with providers on a regular basis, it's still important to be human. I mean, doctors, who belong to the American Board of Orthopedic Surgery, who are board certified by you guys, and they want to be treated like human beings, and they want to feel like they're doing business with an organization that has a heart, that has some compassion, that's not just dictating to them. And I think that's a lesson a lot of the boards have learned over the years, that they need that humanity, and compassion, and that it is a partnership. So I'm excited by that. Well, thank you, David. And one last thing I'll just throw in, if I take a second, is we start off talking about the difference in marketing to female consumers and male consumers. I do think, like, when you're dealing with doctors like you do, there are even distinct differences between pediatricians, marketing to pediatricians, and marketing to surgeons. And there's a difference between marketing to an orthopedic surgeon and some other type of surgeon. So I think it always goes back to understanding your audience. And I guess I will end with that. So thank you, David. It's been great talking to you.